Hey everyone, this is Danny. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is episode number 327. Thank you for joining me on this next podcast episode. We are making our way through the book of Matthew, as we have just recently done with the book of John, just chapter by chapter, impromptu, just reading the text, then letting things come to the surface as the Lord leads and kind of guides the conversation. So we will pick up where we left off in Matthew chapter 5, and we'll just jump right in. It says, "Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him." Now, just for some context, this is speaking of Jesus. Jesus went up to the mountain. When he sat down, his disciples came to him. One thing I think worth mentioning, and as you read through the different Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, you'll find a multiple mentioning of this position of seated. We see Mary seated at the feet of Jesus. When Jesus does the multiplying of the fish and the loaves, he has his disciples have everyone sit down, and they are then granted access to the food that Jesus has multiplied. There are other examples, these just come to mind, but I think it bears consideration in this place of being seated. We are seated with Christ in heavenly places. He is Christ seated at the right hand of the Father. So I think this bears consideration. I think there is a significance in it. I think there is something to gather from it, this place of being seated. So I'll let you process and chew on that, but I do think that there is some weight to this idea, to this observation. Now, what we will read as we continue is commonly referred to as the Beatitudes. Jesus is here giving probably his most widely referred to teaching. You may call it a sermon. He's preaching, and he's really shedding light on, I would say, misconceptions that the people have had, and he's really trying to realign their perspectives on things in light of the kingdom. And he covers many different topics. This is a very practical portion where Jesus is dealing with very much everyday items and issues. And so we'll just jump right back into it, picking back up in verse 2. "And he, Jesus, opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." I'll pause here on this particular one. To be fair, each of these lines can be expounded on, and should be, rather. But this one particularly really resonates with me. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. You know, when we are reborn into Christ, we are dressed newly in His righteousness now becomes ours. By way of his salvation that becomes ours through faith in him, we are now as righteous as we can be. Now, does that mean that we live a life that's perfect without problems or errors? No, but we are in God's sight righteous, not because of anything that we have to offer, but because of what Jesus offered by way of his own body and blood, that now makes clean us for right standing inside of God. Now, with that reality expressed and known, I think perhaps you listening and as I speak, there is a active hunger and thirst of mine that I have for righteousness. I affirm that I am righteous because of what Christ did. But my life, my internal life, my mind, my heart, I'm constantly, I would say, disappointed in the fruit of my inner life, my thoughts, my even desires, all these things that kind of turn their head up in my life. I am always in a place of wishing and hoping for more righteousness in my life to be experienced, to be felt. And this particular verse, I find it to be very encouraging for me, as I'm sure you will for yourself, to know that for those of us who hunger and thirst for righteousness, experienced in our life, in our day-to-day life, in our inner life, our thought life, we shall be satisfied. I think just as I chew on that in the moment, I think when we eat a meal, we eat and we are filled, and we can eat to a place where we are satisfied, and there's a place even beyond that where you've eaten too much and now you're just overly full and almost sick. I think that I see in this verse, when I think about that parallel, the righteousness that we hunger and thirst for, we will get from God, and it will fill us to the point of satisfaction. I think that place, it leaves you in a state of your need is met, that hunger is quenched, but you're not so full that you want nothing to do with food. You're in a good place of balance, and so I can see a parallel here with obtaining that which we hunger and thirst for in righteousness, to the point that we've gotten what we are craving, but there is a place that when we find ourselves in the path of life, that we will find ourselves wanting more. And so I think this is a good thing in the sense that we are satisfied but not complacent, that we know that there is something to reach for, to attain toward, but never getting to this place of apathy, of indifference. That is a very dangerous place. I've been in it. I'm sure you could probably remember situations where you have felt indifferent or apathy towards the things of God. It's this numbness, if you will. So I can see a real blessing indeed for being satisfied and not pushed into this place of so full that you are, in a sense, turned off from more. So I can see a little nuance there that I believe can be helpful. Verse 7. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Now, I want to add here at this observation that I've had in the past, and I think it's helpful. Notice that it says peacemakers, not peacekeepers. I think there is a subtle difference, though a profound difference. It's one thing for a person to be keeping the peace, trying to kind of play to both sides to try to keep peace and harmony between two parties. It's another thing entirely for a person to come into a situation where there is no peace, and rather they make peace. It's a real creative, I would say, assignment, rather than kind of jumping through hoops to try to please two parties. I think peacekeeping is one thing. I think peacemaking is an entirely unique thing. And so notice that it's for those called sons of God, the blessing involves peacemaking. I think this is an important distinction. Verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now, this is a really tough pill to swallow, I think. Who of us feels blessed when others persecute, utter all kinds of evil against you falsely because of God? And how many of us can rejoice and be glad? This is a hard one, but it's clear also. For your reward will be great in heaven. We will join the ranks of those who were persecuted before us, the prophets. So this is a great reminder when we find ourselves in a place of persecution. In those listening from all over the world, they are experiencing different kinds of persecution than we would experience here in the United States. It looks much different, and from one type of persecution to the other, we all experience our own form of it, and in each form, we ought to remind ourselves that we are blessed because our reward is great in heaven. And sometimes I think we do get in this mindset where we think we have this reward mentality. I think I've spoken of this in other episodes, but we get in this heavenly reward mentality. Now, don't get me wrong, that this is spoken of in several instances throughout the Bible. So there is rewards and promises of rewards, and these are all biblical and fine. But we ought to really, and I would put myself in this category also, we ought to really, I think, assess our motivations for things, how we feel, what we feel, why we feel it. Is it because of our love for God? Is it because we want to? We think that it brings us closer to Him because we can experience what He experienced here on earth, or are we experiencing these things and feeling blessed because of a reward? I think there is a real richness in relationship between two people when you treasure them because of what they do for you versus treasuring them because they are a treasure to you. I think these are two entirely different things, and I think our spiritual lives are no different. Do we treasure God because of who He is, or are we treasuring God because of what He can do for us? I think these are critical and important to distinguish and assess in our lives, and then we take that to the Lord to help us to grow into a place of where we should be versus where we are. In verse 13, Jesus, continuing on, says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." I think sometimes in these passages, it's very easy for us to understand them in one context, and we totally lose perhaps an intended meaning. For example, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. Again, I think sometimes this is taken to mean believers are to be a certain way. And if they are not that way, then they are good for nothing and should be thrown out only to be trampled under people's feet. This is not how God perceives, views those who belong to Him. I think there is a parallel here to gather in the sense of how we are to function and operate within God's kingdom, and the purpose of our lives and such. I think those things are here and are important for us to gather. But we ought not to consider this how God thinks about us in light of how we operate, our value to Him. If you don't measure up, you're good for nothing and you should be thrown out and discarded. Well, that's not how God thinks about you, or me, or any of us. We know that this is true because of the price that God was willing to pay for us. We know He treasures us because He was willing to allow the utter destruction of His only Son. Who of us with children would be willing to allow our only child to face the thing that Christ had to face, in light of making available the opportunity for salvation of those who reject you? I dare say none of us would be willing for such, but this is what the Father extended to those who would believe. And so I think we should not lose sight of how much God desires us and how much He loves us. Does He want us to live good and purposeful and intentional lives that is representative of His kingdom? Absolutely. And if you do not choose to live that way, He's going to really even violently correct your course, because He knows that you are capable of so much more. And our choices in life have consequences that we have to experience and endure. And so all these things are at play, but don't lose sight of how God feels about us as His children, and even as those who have yet to come to know Him, but will. Think of how much God desires those to come to know Him. So this extends far beyond that, and we ought to really be diligent in how we are to understand the text. And I think that's something worth mentioning. Verse 17, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Now, for if we're listening to this, and even for a scribe or Pharisee, because they are really the pinnacle of living according to the standard of the law, though we know that no one can measure up to the law. Jesus says, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That would be a really hard thing to hear. But what a primer it is for us to come to the reality that my righteousness is not going to cut it. I am incapable of measuring up. Even in my best attempts at keeping the law, no one can and no one has. Thus enter the need for Jesus to, what does He say? I've not come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them. And that's an intentional word, I think, to fulfill. He fully filled the requirements of the law and the prophetic utterance of the prophets. He has not come to abolish, but to fulfill them. He did what we could not do, what we could never do and have never done. Jesus did that. And so he made the way for us when there was no way. Verse 21, you have heard that it was said to those of old. See, here's where Jesus is now coming in, and he's correcting paradigms that that people have had. They've thought away about something, and now he is correcting that thought process. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your guilt at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. So what is Jesus saying here in this? He's saying to guard your heart against anger, against those, he says your brother, and yes, I can be your physical brother, but it's also your brother in the sense of humanity, those around you, your brothers and sisters in the human race. Guard your heart against anger and hatred and foul speaking of those around you. And if you have any kind of any kind of animosity, of unforgiveness, of things that need reconciled, then go to them, then be reconciled, and then come back and worship God. Offer your gift. This is reconciliation, guarding your heart against anger and hatred, resentment and bitterness. This is one of the things actually in the Welsh revival Evan Roberts mentioned of confessing sin, confessing wrongdoing, being reconciled, making doubtful things, wrong things right. This was one of the parameters that Evan Roberts gave before the Welsh revival broke out in the first of the 1900s. So this is important. Verse 27, he says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell. This is Jesus saying, do what you must to guard your hearts against lust. And it goes deeper than the outward. It actually even begins on the inward level. If we look at someone with lustful intent, we have already committed adultery with them in our heart. And that's what Jesus says it will even count. It's in the place of the heart. It's not necessarily I mean, it is, yes, an outward expression too, but it doesn't even begin there. It begins in the place of the heart, and it begins in the place of the imagination. So we ought to, when those thoughts, when those things come at us, to really combat them, and force them away from us, not making place for them in our minds. Verse 31, it was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife except on the ground of sexual immorality makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Verse 33, again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Isn't that what Jesus did? He prayed for those who persecuted him, those who hated him, who saw him as an enemy and hostile. He loved them. He prayed for them. So this, by doing the same, we can experience our sonship, our daughterhood of our Father who is in heaven. It says, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. You know, as I close out with this observation, in my own life, I come in contact with people who some are just absolutely lovely and a pleasure to be around, and how easy it is to be nice to those people. But then there are those who are so difficult to be around, that you just do not like it, and if you could choose so, you would be far from them. But isn't it easy to be pleasant and to be nice with people who are nice to you? But for those who are just prickly and hateful and frustrating, it's very difficult to be pleasant and lovely with them. But Jesus reminds us here, he reminds me in my life, that what reward is there for you to only love and be pleasant to those who are easy to love and be pleasant to? We ought to, just the same, love and be pleasant to those who are difficult, who are not that easy to be around, and who are very prickly and harsh So I think these are some major considerations for us. It's a very practical section, and more of that is coming as we continue on in other chapters. But this is chapter 5, and I hope that it's helpful with some of these insights. Thank you to those who are joining in newly. I hope that you find a benefit and blessing in these episodes. Thank you so much for those who have been with me through this extended ride. I appreciate your support, and I covet your prayers. I thank the Lord for growing this into something that I could never have achieved, and how its reach it goes across really the whole world, in countries that I would never have an opportunity to reach. So I'm thankful for that, for the Lord's grace and blessing on this, and your faithfulness as you listen, and as the Holy Spirit makes an impact in your life through it. So thank you so much. Please continue to share these episodes with friends and family so we can get the word out to even more people. So I thank you and bless you, and look forward to the next episode. God bless.